Hi, and welcome to Scuba Diving Earth, and my name is Russell Bowyer, and today I'm going to talk about reducing gas consumption when scuba diving. Because no one wants to be the first that has to come up and go to the dive boat, because you can bet your bottom dollar, as you wave goodbye to your dive buddies and you're back on the boat, and when they arrive back on the boat, they'll be saying, "Oh, we just saw a big manta ray or a whale shark or whatever it is," and it'll be at the end of the dive and you weren't there because you had to come up too early. So it's very important that you can improve your air consumption or gas consumption when you're diving. I say gas, well, I'll interchange, probably knowing myself, between gas and air. I say gas because actually what's in a dive tank can be pretty much one of three things. It can be air, which is what you and I are breathing now. It can be nitrox, which is air which is enriched with more oxygen, and there are different percentages of that, or it can be trimix, which is a mix of gases, which is for more advanced divers and for further down in your diver experience if you ever want to go down that route. So we're talking about reducing gas consumption so that basically you extend your dive, because diving is not cheap. And anyway, if you're like me, I absolutely love diving, and if the longer I can stay down, the better. Because the longer you stay down, the more chances you have of seeing something or just literally enjoying the dive. So this is one of three videos about improving air consumption. This one is about actions you can take to improve your air consumption, and I'll come on to those in a second. The other two are about dive kit, in perfecting and having the right dive kit, which will help improve air consumption. And the other one is about things that you can do to improve your air consumption. And what I'm going to be doing, you'll have a link at some point during this video, probably towards the end, which will link you off to the other two videos. And I suggest that you watch each one of those. You can either watch them straight after this or come back and watch them another time. But that will round you off with all of them. I think there's over about 20 different tips. And why that's close to my heart is because you may not realise it, but I'm 6'6", I'm about 250 pounds, and I'm about 27% bigger than the average person. So I need to be that bit more efficient, and I have to find every single way I can to make my air last longer. Because invariably, when I'm on a liveaboard or a dive boat or wherever I'm diving, I'm also diving on a 12-litre tank like you are. And if you are an average person, you'll be 27% smaller than I am. But if you're a big guy like me, then you will also benefit by this, because you'll also be consuming more air. Because the bigger you are, the more air you consume. So you want this air to last as long as possible, because that's all the air you'll have for the dive, unless you double it up and have a twin set or get a bigger one as a 15 litre, which is what I do sometimes. I do dive with a 15 litre to increase the length of my dive, because I love it so much. So anyway, without further ado, let's have a look at scuba diving air consumption, starting off with number one. Now, the first one is about instead of when you first turn your air on and inflating your BCD, which you should do before you jump into the water, because when you jump in, you'll go under, but you want to bob up to the surface, so you all go down together. You don't want to go sinking straight down, because you want to be waiting for your buddy, particularly if you're the first one in, so you don't want to be dropping below the surface. And that's using your own air to put that air in, because if you turn your air on, that will fill up all your hoses, and then you need to use this to fill it up. So you press the button and it will fill the air up. But that's using up, even if it's a little bit, just using up a little bit of air. So all you do is you use your own air. Press on the end. And you fill up your BCD with your own air while you're using the air that you and I are breathing now. That used up at least 2 of my breaths. That's 2 more breaths underwater. Now you may think that's not a lot, but all of these little tips added together will just add that just extra few minutes of dive time, and that can make all the difference. Because I've been on dives and you see something right in the last few minutes, if you have to come to the surface, you'll miss it. So that's a good tip to have. The other one that I like to do, not many people do this, and since I've written my blog, and I've seen more people talking about this one. Now, it's about using your snorkel. Now, admittedly, you know, you could fold this away afterwards, but I do tend to have it attached to my mask while I'm diving. When you first jump in the water and you're waiting for other divers, and particularly if you're in blue water diving when you can see the bottom and see what's going on, you want to be looking down, because invariably if you've got sharks around, oftentimes they disappear as soon as divers start jumping in. You want to be looking down and watching what's going on so you can see the sharks. I get excited because I can see them all swimming around. But instead of using your regulator and using that precious air while you're on the surface, put your snorkel in. So you're just using the air on the surface while you wait, because sometimes if you're the very first person in, you could be waiting possibly 5, maybe sometimes 10 minutes, depending if there's a lot of other newbie divers on the dive boat, it's taking a bit longer to kit up, or if there's a lot more divers, you have to wait longer. So therefore, if you've got your head in the water, or you're already using the gas from your tank using your regulator, you're using up precious air, so use your snorkel. Number 3, excuse me, is all about buoyancy control. Now, buoyancy control comes with experience and practice basically, but what you want to be able to get to position is when you get to the bottom, and assuming the dive is at the same depth through the rest of for the whole dive, is set your buoyancy and leave it at that. There are many newbie divers that what happens is they hold on to their BCD and they're constantly adding air, dumping air, adding air, dumping air, and they keep hold of this. Once you've set your buoyancy and you're neutrally buoyant at whatever depth it is, set it and forget it, and you shouldn't touch this ever again until or unless you have to come up a little bit. So say you're on a gentle rise and you have to just dump little bits of air, or if you're going into a wreck and you're going quite deep and then coming back up again, or whatever it is, or towards the end of the dive and as you come up you have to dump your air. But this should be a set and forget, because each time you press a little more air in and dump a little bit of air, because you're sort of trying to get it right and you're flapping around and all the rest of it, each time this air is reducing, and that gives you less air for you to breathe, and that will of course shorten your dive. Number 4, checking for leaks. If you've got a leak all the time that gas is leaking out of that dive cylinder, you are wasting air. Now, you can have it on your hoses, around your regulator, badly fitting O-rings and so on, or you can have a leaking BCD and so on. You may not actually notice it until you're in on the dive, or your buddy might point out that you've got some bubbles coming out, but make sure you fix that, because if you've got air just leaking out, you're going to be wasting air that you could be breathing, and of course that's going to shorten your dive, and what you want to do is have as much time as possible. Where are we? Number 5, inflating the BCD with just small amounts. Now, what you don't want to be doing is, as you're descending, as you appreciate, you probably have to you get this right. As you appreciate, as you're descending, you become less buoyant, and you have to add air to your BCD. Just little amounts is all you need. And similarly, if you do have to rise up a little bit on the dive for whatever reason, maybe you're coming up a shallow shelf or a reef, just dump little bits of air, because what you don't want to do is go and dump a whole load of air. You become too negatively buoyant, and then you have to add more air to get you back up again. So by just letting out little bits of air, you just tweak it and just get it right. And similarly, when you're adding air, just little bits of air, because if you end up putting too much air, you become too buoyant, you start rising up, then you have to dump that air. And all that air that you're wasting is using up the gas in the tank, which could be used for breathing, and therefore extending your dive. The other tip, coming back onto the surface, I should have probably put these in a better order than this actually, but I always try to be the last diver down. I try to stay on the surface, breathing from my snorkel as long as possible, because what can happen is if you're the very first diver down, and once you're underwater you're breathing on your regulator, that's consuming air, and you all tend to descend together, whether it's down a shot line or just in free water. If there are other divers that are struggling to get off the surface or sometimes people forget their weight belt and they can't come down. You're already down, you've used up some air, precious air, whereas if you're the last one down, you know everyone else has gone down, quickly pop your regulator in, dump your air and go down, and then that way it might even add just a minute or two, and that can make all the difference to your dive time. The other thing actually, while I was talking about leaving the surface, if possible, try and not dump all the air out your BCD. Try doing a duck dive, because then you can force yourself down, because once you get down below the first metre or so, which is where the biggest pressure changes, once the weight of the water and the pressure overtakes your buoyancy, you become more negatively buoyant, and that little bit of air will won't keep you buoyant anymore, and then you'll start to descend. Because then by not dumping all your air, you've then got to add less air to make you neutrally buoyant. So you're just being that little bit more efficient on your descent. The next thing, number 8. The analogy I use for this is, imagine driving a car, assuming you can drive a car and you've got a driving license wherever you are in the world, and you're approaching a junction. Now imagine you waited till you get to the junction and then you slammed on the brakes. Well, not only would you screech and maybe skid to a stop, you're putting more stress on your brakes and on the car and on the tyres. More than likely, if you left it too late, you wouldn't actually stop at the junction, and you'd probably cause an accident if there's other cars coming. Now imagine the same principle when you're descending to the bottom. And if you don't add air as you're descending, you're going to descend faster and faster and faster and faster and faster until you get near to the bottom. And then if you leave it too late to start adding air, you're going to have to add a lot more air, or possibly start finning to keep yourself off the bottom. And it's a bit like having to brake that bit harder. So when you're approaching that junction, you leave it too late, you have to brake harder. So you're wearing the brakes out more. And the similar thing is you have to pump more air in to slow yourself down, because you've got more momentum. You'll use more air. And what will probably happen is you'll overinflate your BCD. Then you'll find that you'll start coming back up again, and then you'll have to dump some air. So it's all about just controlling that descent slowly. As you start feeling yourself increase momentum, just add little bits of air, just slowly. So ideally what you should do is, when you get to your dive, or get close into your dive depth, because you've added it slowly, you should automatically twice there, you should be neutrally buoyant at the depth you want to be. You don't want to be getting to the bottom, hitting the bottom and then adding air and so on. Be controlled. The other thing you should do is, going back to adding air and taking out air of your BCD. If you're sort of going up and down, say you're in a wreck and you're going up and through the different compartments of a wreck, for example, just use your lungs or your breathing as buoyancy. So breathe in a little bit, you'll come up a little bit, and breathe out a bit and you'll go back down again. And this is quite useful, for example, if there's just a deeper trough, and there might be a ledge that you want to go and have a look at, and shine your torch under, to help you get down to that bottom bit. Just breathe out all that air, and you'll become less buoyant, because obviously your lungs are very buoyant underwater, and all that air will make you more buoyant. So breathe out and you'll sink down, and then breathe back in and you'll come up. But one most important thing you've got to remember from your diver training is you must not hold your breath. It's okay to not breathe for periods underwater, but it's okay only if you're staying at the same level or the same depth. If you're holding your breath, and the minute you start changing depth by significant amounts, your lungs will overexpand and you could end up with a barotrauma. So just be very, very careful with this particular technique. I don't want anyone having any accidents. So there's no problem with using your breathing to regulate your buoyancy, but just be very, very mindful of holding your breath and coming up significant depth. You want to be letting small amounts of air all the time as you're ascending. Particularly the most important thing is, you wouldn't want to have a big breath in, hold it and come up, because there's more air to suddenly expand. So that's just a safety tip. So please be careful. The other thing about diving is you probably understand from your training, or maybe just need a slow reminder, is that the deeper you go, the more air you consume. Because as you go deeper, your lungs need more of this air to actually fill them up as you're deeper. That's Boyle's law. So what you can do is, if you dive slightly shallower than the other group around you, I always try to be, if I can, just about a metre above everyone else. So I'm just breathing just a little bit less air. And oftentimes, by being a metre or even 2 or possibly 3 metres, not too much, above the rest of the group, you can still see the bottom. And then if you see something, certainly if you're a metre or so just above it, you can soon descend down to have a closer look. But certainly if you're diving where what you're wanting to see is more around you, whether you're a metre, 2 metres or 3 metres off the bottom, won't make a lot of difference to the actual enjoyment of the dive, but it will certainly make a big difference to your air consumption and extend your dive time. Now, these 2 tips, a slight repeat on, I mentioned these and what you can do for yourself, and that is swimming with the current, not against it, but it's more of an action really. So you'll soon find, if you're swimming against the current, you'll soon run out of air, because you'll be panting very, very quickly. You don't want to be doing that. You want to be just breathing gently in and out, and that will be on what you can do in the video about what you can do yourself. So swim with the current, not against it, so be it like a drift dive. And then number 12 is an action you can take, is to dive more. Now, I'm sure most people wouldn't object to that if you love diving. Of course, if you can afford it, and if you can dive where you live, even better. And if you can afford to go on lots of holiday vacations on liveaboards or whatever it is, enjoy your diving, because the more you dive, the better you'll get at air consumption. So that's great. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Why am I thanking you? Well, thank you for listening, I should say. If you've learned something, you've enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up, and please subscribe to the channel, because I'll be doing lots more videos like this that I hope that you'll get something from. I hope so. And by subscribing, you'll get notified when I put up more videos to help you improve your diving as you build your experience. If you have any comments about air consumption, your tips and tricks about how you've extended your air and what worked best for you, or if you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those. I'm sorry this has been a rather long video, but there was a lot of tips there. The other 2 are a little bit shorter than this. So please click on one of those links to take you off to the other 2 in this series. And thank you very much for listening. And it's been Russell Bowyer, scubadivingearth.com. Take care and happy diving. Bye for now.